welcome. My name is Dr. Chelsea Haig, and we are here today to talk about managing big feelings during distance learning in the pandemic. Obviously, many things happening, right? And I think it's been pretty tough for most of us who are parenting children during this time. Um, we are going to talk about relationship-based parenting. So relationship-based parenting relies on the relationship in order to get kids to behave. So we go ahead and toss things out like punishment, lots of no's, some consequences, but only natural and logical ones. And we're really relying on the relationship in order to nurture and grow your child toward resiliency so that they can thrive and you don't have so many challenges, right? So I want to say that this is a picture of me that I drew. And at the beginning of the pandemic, my own family was on a screen-free month because we were having some challenges with screens. I've got 3 kids who are young, and I have also raised a niece who's now 20. So we were off screens, and as the time wore on through, with shelter in place and everything, we started to really become dependent on screens in order to get anything done. And there were some hot spots, like 5 more minutes of sleeping, or like in the car, or like when I just need to get through a meeting, or when I need like a second to myself. But as we sort of tussled with this challenge, which I think a lot of us are having, right, around screens right now, something I really realized was that all of us are dealing with so much stress, and sometimes that manifests with screens and sometimes it manifests other ways. For us, it was manifesting a lot with getting off of screens. And big feelings can look all kinds of ways. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to just tell you briefly about positive parenthood, relationship based. I run it with my mom. We do coaching, courses, and community. You are welcome to always join our open group so that you can get some of the goodness that is this parenting approach. I came to positive parenthood as a mom of 3 who was really struggling. And I was a professor of education, of social emotional learning. And so I thought that I had it in the bag. And of course, I did not have it in the bag. It was really challenging, even though I knew all the theories. I realized all that education didn't really matter when my twins were fighting over one purple spoon. And so what I got from this parenting approach was the practical tools that match my theoretical orientation, and also calm, cooperation, a way to get my kids to help or to move with me through the day that wasn't so tense and challenging and hard. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I know that there's been a really significant uptick in big feelings since the pandemic, and whether you are dealing with a 3-year-old or a 13-year-old, these are tools that will work. And let's talk about what big feelings are. And if you want to add in the comments sort of in your own family, what happens when your children have big feelings, or what comes to mind when you think of that phrase. Definitely for us, it's stuff like hitting, what I hear from most families, hitting, yelling, lying, extreme sort of negativity, saying stuff like, I hate school, or I hate so-and-so, or what, those kinds of like provocative statements. It can look physical. So sometimes kids will reach out, hit each other, hurt each other. It can look like running and hiding. So say something happens, or your 7-year-old doesn't want to be on Zoom and they run and hide. So those kinds of things are the sorts of things that we're talking about when we talk about big feelings. And I think the most important thing first is to just recognize that those behaviors are stress behaviors. And they're big and they're challenging to deal with. And they come from a place of your child being unable to cooperate. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, so hitting is definitely one of them. Tantrums is a way that kids express big feelings, just stuff that's too big for them to manage or navigate in their body. And sort of the direction we want our kids to go is to have capacity to navigate a range of emotional states, right? Inside of the relationship with the adult. Yeah, so definitely saying you're tired or kind of a loss of affect, exhaustion, being unable to do it. Those are also big feelings, misdirecting, blaming others, lying, feeling like you're lying, feeling like they're manipulating you. All of those kinds of things would definitely fall into this category. Yeah, I don't like school. That's, I think, a big one for a lot of kids right now. And I just want to hold for um, our kids that we're really asking them to do something that's developmentally so inappropriate. And so, as we sort of deal with these tricky moments, just know that that's a big piece of it too. So let's talk about where these come from. So big feelings are caused by stress. So when we think about stress, there's a particular way I want us to think about it, and I want us to think about it as literally anything that gets in the way of cooperation. Anything. So if you think about your child, you make spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, and they come to dinner and they refuse to sit down because they only want tacos. That's a stress expression, right? If tell your child, okay, you got 5 more minutes, you got 2 more minutes, you got 1 more minute, now screen is all done, and there's a big tantrum, that is a stress behavior. So something is getting in the way of them cooperating. Now, it is certainly the case that there are some kinds of stress that are productive and good. Okay, so a little bit of stress is really great for development because it helps our children learn sort of how to be in the world, right? And it helps them grow. So we do want a little bit of stress, but for most of us, and for most of our children right now, it's not a little bit of stress. It's a lot of stress, and it may be toxic stress. So that can come from a lot of different places. It could be that you have a highly sensitive child who experiences stress from the buzz of the lights. It could be that your child's sibling has something that they don't have and they really want it. That's stress, right? So anytime something is getting in the way of them cooperating, we're going to call that stress. And big feelings come from a stressed place. And so the really important piece of that is that you stay connected with your child through these feelings so that they can learn to navigate that like range of emotional states, up, down, because that's going to happen in life. Like in life, there's a range of emotional states. So when I keep saying, I feel like I've said a couple of times that I really want you to stay connected during these feelings. And that's because we work with a co-regulation framework. So you may have heard of this. It's definitely in some schools. The basic idea is that you and your child are hardwired to take on each other's feelings, and your child is hardwired to take on your feelings. So let me tell you a story about my own family and my own co-regulation with my kids that illustrates this. So um, I have had the experience, and I'm sure many of you have here, where I have a really tough day at work and I come home from work and I'm like, just give me 3 hours. Then everyone's going to be in bed. Just give me 3 hours. Like, I'm coming out of my office now. I just want 3 hours of like sweetness so that we can get through and everybody can go to sleep. And then it's like the worst night ever. Like all of the things happen that could possibly happen. And what's going on in that moment is they're co-regulating with me. So they're reading my stress from my workday and they're manifesting it through their behaviors. So the milk spills, the kids get in a fight, they refuse to brush their teeth, like all of this stuff happens. There's big tantrums, maybe they get into a physical altercation. And part of me is like, why am I, like what's going on here? And really what's happening is they're reading my stress. So another example of this is mornings are quite hectic right now, right? And probably they are for you too. I'm trying to get my own work set up. I've got my kids, like sometimes I can't figure out which Zoom they're supposed to be on and it changes and then it's Wednesday, it's a whole different set of Zooms. And so I experience stress about their school schedule, which bleeds into their interactions, right? Then they start to feel it also. And that sort of sets the stage for a lot of the behaviors that are like, I don't like school, I hate school, etc. On the flip side, when we talk about using co-regulation in order to bring it down so that your children can really thrive with your parenting, we're talking about the adult taking an increased responsibility for the emotional landscape. So you see this picture of this like parent figure with the child's figure, right? And the two little hearts. So it's taking care of yourself so that you can transmit calm. Your children are probably the people who can most read you, right? So you can't do this inauthentically. You actually have to calm your own self down and then use that calm, not like I did in the evening example, right? But instead to really help them calm down. Now, with time, if you remain calm, this is like one of the key things, right? If you remain calm, they're going to also calm down. I'm sharing this because I can give you the best parenting tools in the book, in the world. And if you cannot maintain a sense of calm, they're going to fail. Now, it's not to say that you need to be calm all the time. That's not humanly possible. And there is so much value in repair. But it is to say, and our kids do need rupture, both rupture and repair in order to build resiliency. However, it is to say that a lot is going to be a lot better if you can, and your kids are going to learn to cooperate more when you can maintain your own sense of calm. And I know this is like the most frustrating time to do that right now because the world is not calm. So sometimes we think about it as a teeter totter, right? So if you have a child who is up here, right, having a really big feeling, maybe they're having a tantrum, maybe they're hiding under the desk, maybe they're saying they hate school, maybe they're taking forever to like write one sentence, right? Whatever it is, if they're up here, sort of the natural tendency, and certainly between adults, is to meet somebody in the emotional place where they are, right? I don't want you to do that though. When they're up here, I want you to meet them down here. So I want you to be on the other side of the teeter totter. So if they're screaming and crying and yelling and hitting, I want you to whisper. I want you to slow your movements way down. And in time, you're going to bring them back into regulation with you, right? So that you're even. But if they're up here, and you meet them up here, or you get things escalate quickly, which they can because we're so connected to our kids, right? And they do, right? When that happens and we get into a negative pattern of co-regulation where neither parent nor child is calm, and it makes it worse. It just builds, right? So I think what's really key here when you think about co-regulation, it's imagine knowing that you are deeply connected to your child and they are deeply connected to you and reading simple cues, right? This part of your face, like your brow and your eyes, is one of the key places that they're reading those cues from. So soften your brow, shining eyes, right? If you're trying to kind of fake it and calm yourself down. And then the other piece is a teeter totter, right? So knowing that if they're way up here, you've got to be way down here. And you may have seen, sometimes I'll see like a really experienced, wonderful teacher do this. And you may have had that experience where you like walk into a classroom and there's like first, second, third, fourth, even bigger kids, graders, and they're making a lot of noise, like maybe sitting in a circle or something, and they're loud. And the teacher will just whisper. The teacher literally whispers, and all of a sudden it's like magic. The kids get drawn into that and they start calming down and getting quiet, right? Of course, it takes a little bit of time, but it's the same principle, right? And so kids co-regulate with the closest adult, or like, a figure that is taking up adult space, like an older sibling or a babysitter. Most often, especially right now, a parent. Also a teacher, of course, if you're in teacher land. So when we think about this way of parenting, that co-regulation is the backbone, okay? So today we're going to talk about what to do when things get explosive and hot and challenging. And there are so many tools that we work with at Positive Parenthood. There's like 25, right? When I work with people in a coaching or a course relationship, we work with many, many different tools. And today we're going to talk about what to do in these really challenging moments. And there's so many considerations about what tools you're going to pick up. Okay, so for example, one of our tools that I have parents use a lot is melodic intonation, which is a really consistent way to use your voice to get kids to cooperate with a task that they need to do. But when I look at a child who's having an upset, I need to look at where it's happening, the place, the space, the age, my own emotions, because remember we're co-regulating, the child's state, and think like I need to feel into whether melodic intonation is going to be the right tool, right? And probably if the child is in a really, really tricky moment, right? If they're having really big feelings, I'm not actually going to pick that tool. So there is some, some feeling into and some expertise for you to develop around when to pick what tool for which child. And of course, it's going to matter who the child is, right? That's one of the biggest pieces. What works for child A doesn't work for child B. What works for child A last week might not work next week. So it's about developing a number of different tools that you can have at the ready, and that you can use both in order to sort of nurture the ground of your parenting so that when things do go south, which they're going to sometimes, you've got something to stand on. And also that's actually the majority. That's like the 97%. And then 3% of the times, and today we're sort of focusing on the 3%, we're going to talk about, okay, so what do we do when things do really get challenging and there are a lot of big feelings? And I want to say, for us to get to a place where the number of big feelings decreases, you got to do the other 97% too. So really making sure that you're using heavy, heavy praise, lots of presence, slowing yourself way down and taking care of yourself, right? And these tools will work across the lifespan. They're going to work with your babies. They're going to work with your toddlers. They're going to work with your elementary schoolers and middle schoolers and high schoolers and in-laws and coworkers. Of course, it is the case that if you use, how you apply a tool is going to change depending on the age of your child. So let's talk about the 3 yeses. So this is actually one of my favorite tools to use. And the 3 yeses is a tool that I like to have people use when children are in a moment of deep upset. Now, there's a particular kind of child that this often works really well for. So I'm going to give you some examples in a minute, but I'm just going to say that many of us who have what I would call a highly sensitive kids, so kids who really sort of tend to their surroundings, they feel stuff intensely. It's super important for them to know that they matter and how they matter. These kids often also have a lot of big feelings and big upsets because they feel stuff intensely and they're sensitive. So for a lot of kids, those kinds of kids, 3S is a wonderful tool. Also a really good tool for an older kid, and a good tool for children who need to feel felt or who are just experiencing something that's really challenging, which is, I think all of us right now. So the 3 yeses, you're going to ask 3 questions to your child that allow them to say yes. Okay. We're trying to help them feel felt. Okay. So when you think about what the questions are, they really need to be framed from the child's perspective. So if there has been an upset and you feel frustrated about it, or like the child did something that was wrong or not okay, you got to get out of your own perspective and into your child's perspective to do the 3 yeses. Okay. So you're gonna acknowledge how the child feels. They offer a structure for talking. Okay. A way for us to communicate and be together around something that's challenging. And they help a child feel felt. When kids feel felt, they are the amount to which they can cooperate just goes way up, right? Way, 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 way up. So let me give you a couple of examples of the 3 yeses. So I'm going to give you first an example of how I use them with my kindergarten twins the other day. I'll give you 2 examples from them, and then I'm going to give you an example from a family that I worked with recently who's got bigger kids. So I have a preschool daughter who's in preschool, goes to the real preschool a couple times a week, and my twins who are in kindergarten and they don't, obviously they're doing distance learning. And we went to pick up the preschooler, and we were out of the car, and one of my twins ran off, and it's like a church parking lot. She like ran behind one of the buildings. So I couldn't see her. So she came back, I got her back, and then she started crying. And so we were talking sort of about what was going on, and I used the 3 yeses. Now, I didn't talk about the running away, okay? So that's important here. I didn't like bring up the fact that she just ran away and it was totally unsafe because I needed to help her feel felt first. She's not going to be able to cooperate with that until she knows that I understand how she's feeling. So the 3 yes questions that I asked her were, you really wish you could go to school. Preschool looks so fun. It feels not fair that sister gets to go to school and that you have to stay here and be on the Zoom with mama. Okay. So she said yes to all of those questions, and that doesn't fix it. And it's not permissive. Some people say like, oh, this is permissive parenting, and it's not that. We actually hold very firm boundaries this way with these tools, right? So it doesn't fix it, but it gives her a way to say what it was that caused the behavior and to feel felt. So after that, all I did was say, tomorrow when we pick sister up, you're going to be a whole day older. And I know that you're going to remember our family rule. That was a little tricky, but I know you're going to remember our rule tomorrow that is, we always stay together. Okay, so a couple of things. First, I did the 3 yeses. I gave her the space to process. And then I just gave her a positive way to think about the future. There's no negatives. It's not ever like, don't you ever run away from me like that again. It's just, it's a vote of confidence. You're going to be okay. And tomorrow you're going to remember to follow our family rule. Family rules are great to have, not too many of them, and always positively stated. So our family rule is we always stay together. So super simple, can be applied to many different situations. So 3 yeses. Another example of the 3 yeses with a family that I worked with recently. They had gone to Tahoe in order to get some space, in order to just like have a change of scenery after having been home for so long. And this was a trip that was planned. It was over the summer, planned pre-pandemic. And the girl really wanted to bring a friend. And she was mad about not being able to bring a friend, which, is fair enough, right? So she was really upset about that. And they had gone with the grandparents, and the other kids were playing, she's 12. The other kids were playing board games with the grandparents and the family. And the 12-year-old didn't want to participate. And she was really sullen and sulking and only wanted to be on her phone. And the parents were like mortified because the grandparents had paid for this lovely trip and they should be enjoying themselves and spending family time. And the girl just wanted to be on her phone and was being, she was a little edgy, pushing it a little bit. And so when I talked to the mom, we had a coaching session because I just didn't know what to do. They tried unplugging the internet. And then, that she got really mad then. And there was some really big behaviors. So they called and I was like, okay. So she was in her room. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the 3 yeses. The point is not to get her to a place where she's happily playing the board game. The point is just to like help her feel felt so that she can participate in whatever way is going to work for her. So we got to do our own internal work to understand that sometimes it's not going to be cheery, right? And then I had the mom go into the bedroom and the girl was sitting on the bed. So I wanted mom to sit on the floor, side by side. So a lot of times with older kids, you want to have a side by side conversation, like in the car or walking somewhere. So there's not too much eye contact. It could be embarrassing. And she asked for 3 yes questions. So what she asked her was, you really wish your friend was here. It feels really babyish and boring to play board games. You don't even want to talk to us. Okay, so it's super from the girl's perspective. It's not from mom's perspective. That's like, why aren't you participating in this lovely trip? Right? It's really focused on her. 3 questions to which she can say yes so that she feels felt. We want our kids to know and to feel that our love for them is not contingent on how they are or on their feelings. Okay, so she did come down and play the board games after they used the 3 yeses. She wasn't delighted about it, but she did do it. So I'll give you one more 3 yes example, and then I would love to hear from any people who have a question about the 3 yeses or a situation that you might like to apply this to. And then we'll talk about 2 other tools real quick. So another situation is that pre-pandemic, we go to Mexico very often to visit my in-laws. And my in-laws, at this particular visit, I got 3 kids. They had all kinds of cups, but they had this one particular cup that had a straw in it. and like built in. And my kids fought over the straw at every meal. Okay, so we were there for like 3 weeks, every single meal fighting over the straw cup. And I was super embarrassed because I was like, oh my gosh, my in-laws probably think I can't control my kids. And like, can't we just rotate the straw cup? Can we buy more straw cups? Can we just throw the straw cup away? Of course, none of those things was an option. And so we were having battles about who got this cup, and they were really wearing on me. And one morning, one of my kids crawled under the table, big family breakfast, child under the table because she didn't get the straw cup. And I got her out and I sat her on my lap, and it really took something for me to do this because I was like sure that everybody was judging me. Just as it took something for that teenage mom or that 12-year-old mom to do to really lean into her child's perspective and ask 3 yes questions, right? Um, so I asked her, you really want the straw cup? You feel like you really can't wait. You need it right now. You're mad your sister won't give it to you. Okay, so she said yes to all of those things, and then the tears subsided. So it didn't fix the situation, but it did mean she could sit on my lap for the rest of the breakfast until her sister finished her whatever she was drinking and passed the straw cup, which she did, right? So this is a tool that's we can use to sort of get us through something if something is tricky with a relationship, with a feeling felt, right? So it can be really good. Sometimes I use the 3 yeses right now in order to help my kids get through Zooms when they're really upset or really don't want to participate. I would love to hear if there's maybe 1 or 2 people who wants to share a situation that they might like to use the 3 yeses in. Is there any brave soul who would be willing to share with us something about what's going on in their family and where they think they might use this tool? Yeah, Sarah. Sarah M. You gotta unmute yourself. There you go.
So there's many situations throughout every day with my son, who's 6.5. But recently we were in New Hampshire, and so it was not in our daily routine. We were on a vacation, and um, this is the specific example. We were hiking. We saw a little pond that he found this one frog, and the frog like hopped away, and we continued on our hike, and the whole walk he was upset that he wanted to go find that frog, and we were continuing on and on and on, and he just kept getting more upset. I mean, he walked with us, but this type of example happens with him all the time, that he gets like kind of stuck on, and then so my husband was like, oh well, I know you're upset about the frog, but we're not going back to that pond because we're continuing on the hike, and um the chances of you finding that one frog are basically zero. Those aren't the three.
Yeah, so this is great, right? This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm sure I see lots of nodding heads. I think people can probably relate to this kind of situation, right? Where it's like, we can't look for the frog, we don't have time to look for the frog, and we need to move on with the hike. And now you have a child who's very upset about not getting the frog. And so I think the difference, if you use the 3 yeses, so dad says, I understand you're upset about the frog, but we need to move on. And probably the way that he reads it is like the most salient part of that sentence is the last piece.
Right.
So what he feels is, but we need to move on.
Right.
So it might actually take probably the same amount of time to use the 3 yeses
And
without.
I've never heard of this before, so I think it
Yeah,
would
no,
help.
totally. I think it's a perfect example, right? Because what often ends up happening for us is that, and for most families, right, is that we try to make our kids feel felt, and they're on a different plane, right? Because they're so focused, and kids get stuck on this kind of thing all the time, right? Where they're sort of really into something, and we're really focused on like the next thing, which is moving forward with the hike. And so I think for this kind of kid who gets really into something, that it's a great example of how you could use it to move him through. So I'm super curious, like if you imagine, how do you think he would respond to 3 questions, positive questions about that frog? Do you think it would work for
Yeah,
him?
no, I think it might. I I'll try it.
Yeah, for sure. That's
I
all it
do.
is,
Yeah.
right? It's totally just it's a curiosity. And for some kids, and you'll know, right? If you try something and it's not the right tool for your kid, of course you're gonna know right away because it's not gonna work.
Right.
Um, and oftentimes, what our kids really need is a way to move forward. And so asking a series of 3 yeses helps them process what's happening and integrate it, and then have some
Almost like
kind of
moving.
tangible way to move forward. Yeah.
Uh, so he does stuff like this like throughout the whole entire hike. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, does the 3 yeses kind of, I mean, we have to keep doing it, but does it start to, I don't know, like I guess we always have to do,
Sure.
like almost does it become like, oh, this is, do you think he'll start to internalize, I don't know, like,
I
or is it
do.
always have to
Yeah,
come from me?
I do. I mean, I do. I think that if you just like drop it in here and there, right, it's going to take a lot longer to, like a mass change. But I think that when you use something like this as part of shifting how you're parenting him so that he can
Yeah.
move through these like many upsets, because of course it's not a frog, then it's a bird, then it's like this other thing that he
The
wants to,
next thing after that, yeah.
then it's the snack, right? So well, as part of sort of a I don't know, like a big effort, I definitely think that it's to say like, no, I'm going to use relationship based tools. And yes, you might still get stuck sometimes on a frog or a snack or whatever. Excuse me. But the number of times that you're going to get stuck is going to decrease.
Mhm.
And you're going to have, you start to have more tools. And this is one of them
Mhm.
that are going to help him move through. So I think it will work just as like a drop in here and
Yeah,
there. It'll work tomorrow if you do it tomorrow. And to make really deeper change, I think you have to sort of do the 3 S's as part of a concerted effort.
got it. Thank you.
But it'll work. Yeah. Like, I use the 3 S's on kids that I've just met all the time, and it usually works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the other one, this is actually perfect. Um, oh wait, hold on. I just want to address this one question about kids feeling patronized. So some people are like, my child doesn't want me to go to the 3 S's because they feel patronized, and they'd rather I fix the problem for them. Yeah. So this is common, right? Um, so yeah, that's common. And what I want to say is that probably what they're reading from you is inauthenticity, right? So your kids are going to pick up on any like speed that you have going on, or like wish that you could continue on with the hike faster. Like that might happen, it happens like on play dates, right? Where kids need more attention, but you're just trying to get your own adult needs met by like talking to the other parent for like a hot second, right? And so there's something tricky that's happening there. So to use these kinds of tools, we have to really slow down. It is a more intensive way to parent, but almost always when our kids sort of resist, oftentimes it's about authenticity, and it's often also just like a teeny little shift. Like sometimes it'll be like a tiny, teeny little shift around how we say something that has a really significant impact. So an example of that, and then we're going to move on to the next tool. An example of that is that today I was watching another parent lead my kids' pod. So they were doing some learning, and one of the children got up from the pod and went and was looking at something else in the yard. And she said a couple of times, "Do you want to come and sit with us? Are you ready to come work on your name?" Et cetera, et cetera. And he said no. And she asked him a few more times, and ultimately he did re-engage like 20 minutes later. But it was just a tiny shift. Could almost guarantee you that if she had said, time for name, he would have come. But what happened is she didn't say time for name. She said, are you ready to write your name? And a lot of times I hear that from parents where we ask questions, and then sometimes what happens, it's so unfortunate because I think most of the time when parents do this, we're like trying to be respectful of our kids' experience. And so we end up undoing ourselves because we ask questions about things that are not really questions at all. And so you're like, are you ready to come write your name? He's like, no. And then you're like, you have to come write your name. But it's like, okay, if you're going to ask a question, they just said no. And what we want our kids to learn is that we respect their voices. And we just want to give them little choices. Like it could have been a good question in that scenario, might have been, um, would you like to write your name now, or would you like to have a snack and then write your name? Right. So that's like a child-sized choice. Either way, you're going to write your name. But you definitely have to get sort of into the practice. And that's what actually one of the reasons I also work with video with people, because a lot of these things, you can't even really notice them when you're actually like in the act of parenting. It's hard to see what's happening. And it can even be hard to hear when you tell the story or somebody else tells the story. When we look at a video of like a 1 or 2 minute video of somebody doing something, we can really see like, oh, it was a question. So now your child is acting out because they perceived it as a question. And now they feel like their voice has been disrespected, which it has, because, you know, it's like if you're going to leave and go to school and you ask if they want to put their shoes on and they say no, and then you make them put their shoes on. Right? So that feels bad. And then there's big behavior. So it's like, how do we just make these little changes? Like, how do we just say this slightly differently so that we're setting ourselves and our children up for success? Um, which is, you know, I mean, even when I do this and have, you know, take quick videos of my children parenting, or me parenting them, I notice things I just don't, I don't notice when I'm like actually parenting, because when I'm actually doing the parenting, I'm like managing all the things. So this is another tool I'll wait to use sort of when you're in the opposite situation of the hike, right? So we have this description, or you could use it in a hike situation, but I think what was salient about the hike situation is that the family wants to move on, right? So like we're going to move forward. So that's one way to go. So this would not be a tool that's good for that moment. This is a tool for when things are really challenging and you need to, or you've decided you're going to hold a boundary. And sometimes you might decide to not hold it, right? Sometimes you might decide like this is not actually that important. But so I'll wait is for something that you've decided this is like actually really critical, and I'm not going to engage the tantrum. So what often happens is that we unwittingly reinforce our kids' tantrums, but you know, by checking in with them or trying to give them, you know, get them to calm down before they're ready. So make an I'll wait example, or sort of honestly a little bit more about I'll wait. So if you think about it, if you think about a tantrum, a metaphor, and some of you may have heard of this metaphor, is to think about it like a tunnel. So you've got to go through the tunnel, right, in order to get through the tantrum. So you can't kind of go out the top of the tunnel. You have to actually let the tantrum run its course. And some tunnels are really long and some tunnels are super short. And as parents, we know that they're tunnels and they're not permanent. But for our kids who are in the dark in the tunnel, it really can feel like, is there an end to this tunnel? And so you're using all weight in order to maintain connection until your child gets to the tunnel. When they're in the tunnel, when they're in the tantrum, they actually don't have capacity to sort of make sense of what you're saying, right? What happens, and for those of you who are Dan Siegel fans, I would recommend his work if you haven't come across it. But what happens is that kids do this thing called flipping their lid. So if this is the brain, your fist, if you put your thumb kind of in the middle, this is the brain. Your fingers are the prefrontal cortex. So that's where learning lives. It's where judgment and impulse control live. And most importantly, it's where language lives. So it's also the last part of the brain to develop. So our kids are this part is developing. Brain develops back to front. So when we get under stress, we do this thing called flipping our lid. Okay, so that means less blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, more attention to this part of your brain. So this is the limbic system. That's like my thumb. That's like the seat of the emotions. It's the part of the brain that reads cues like a wrinkled forehead or like harsh eyes, and lets the body know if they're safe or not. And the base of the brain, right? And the base of the brain controls impulse or controls defensive mechanisms like keeping you safe from like a saber-toothed tiger, right? And so of course, like there might not be a saber-toothed tiger running at your child, but the reaction is the same. Something has scared them, and then they start to operate from here. So this is where most of our big behaviors and big feelings come from. So before we go to language, which is what most grown-ups like to do, before we go to language, we got to help them get their lid back down, right? Um, and in order to do that, we sometimes just need to settle in and wait. So middle of a tantrum, it's definitely not the time to like start moralizing or telling kids what they should be doing. If you have a child who's in a big tantrum, like if you were going to do this in the frog example, right? So a child who's like really wants something that it can't have. What it means is that you're going to stop whatever you're doing and you're literally going to settle in and wait quietly. And I would just say, I'll wait. And you might use this like if you're trying to get a child onto a Zoom or you're trying to get a child to put their shoes on and they're refusing to do it. Or if you're trying to get a child to get in the bath or take medication and they won't do it. I'll wait. And then you may position yourself if you're in a house or in a room, you want to sit with your back against the door. That's called being door side, so that they can't escape and go into another place. And then you're really not going to engage them until they engage you. So a lot of times, and you've probably had this experience, we will do things like say to our kids, are you ready? Are you ready? It looks like you're better now, or something like that. And it's like pouring gasoline on the fire. Then the tantrum reignites, right? So I literally want you to just settle in and wait. You're going to be in the same space until they're ready. But I do want you to avoid asking if they're ready. Okay, so, and to allow them to re-engage. So an example of this from my own family is that I had a child the other day who went into a big, gigantic tantrum at dinner time. And I actually had to remove her from the table. I took her to our bedroom, and I was sitting against the door, and she was having a major tantrum. I don't even remember what ignited it, but she was really upset. And I sat with my back against the door, and there are some kids' books in there. So when she sort of stopped screaming, I started just like sitting there and reading the children's book super quietly and super slowly out loud. And I had to read a couple of books, but she did come over and sit with me and start to re-engage. Okay, so at that point, sometimes what happens is our tendency is to teach the child a lesson, like to say maybe, okay, it wasn't actually like it. You can't get that upset about who gets to pour the water or like explain things away. And I actually want to sort of stay away from that because remember, her brain has just been flipped. So she's been operating from here. And I just want to give her a lot of praise for coming back into the relationship. So I might say, like, so you're ready to go. Nice. You want to read one more book and then we'll go have dinner. So I don't actually say anything about what just happened at that moment. Now, if I'm going to say anything, I'm going to do it at bedtime or another reflective moment that you have with your child. And all I'm going to say is, that was kind of tricky at dinner. I know that tomorrow you're going to be a day older and it'll be easier. Right? So I'm going to acknowledge and then I'm going to push it forward. So I'm going to prime it forward. It's going to get easier. And another example of this is I'm supporting a pod right now that is a first grade pod, and there's a child who's really struggling in this pod, and she has had several experiences where she throws stuff and then gets really angry, right? And is gets particularly pronounced at pickup and drop off. So it's a transition problem. And they've been so mom and I have been talking about how to use all weight during drop off, during pickup. So there's like a closing thing. Mom's been getting there a little bit early so she can participate in the closing. And sometimes there's still a big blow up, like when the pens have to be clicked and put away, and when the backpack has to be taken and time to leave. So sometimes it's good for her to say to her daughter when she's having a meltdown, "I'll wait." And then I mean, you might make sounds like, hmm, you could like do that and as to like to kind of show your engagement, but you really are waiting. That really involves you clicking all of the other stuff off of your list. So settle in knowing that you're not going to get to the laundry, you're not going to be able to get onto the Zoom, and you may be in it for the long haul. I worked with a family a couple of years ago whose child couldn't get into the bath, and I was in their home doing a coaching session, and it was bath time, and the child started to have a meltdown. Um, and I was like, okay, are we in for this or are we not in for this? So if you're not going to go all weight, you're going to say like, oh no, you don't have to get into the bath. Then I want you to do that ASAP. So like as soon as it starts, because I don't want your child to learn like if I tantrum for 35 minutes, then I can not get into the bathtub. So parents said, we're in. And I sat in the bathroom with that child for 2.5 hours. He was screaming. I had my back against the door. He was really didn't want to get in the bathtub. And I just said, I'll wait. We're getting in the bathtub. I'll wait. And he did get in and take his bath. But it did take 2.5 hours. So knowing that this is a tool to use when you have the emotional and mental and time, space, and capacity. And if you don't go this route. But when you do, it can be a really powerful tool. It's actually I think it's one of the hardest tools to use effectively. And it's one of the last tools that I teach people who work with me because before we use something like this, we want to really nurture the ground of your parenting. So for every I'll wait, we want it to be like about a 97:3 ratio. So like 97% of your interactions with your child should be super positive and praise based, like so much praise. You want it to be high quality praise, right? You want it to be high quality, super specific, warm, shining eyes. You want to label what kids are doing. And then when stuff comes up, that's when you use these kinds of tools. And they are going to be so much more effective when you really pour on that praise and presence so that you're nurturing kind of the grounds of your parenting and then you have a place to stand. Um, so that's all to say that it's hard to parent this way. This is a more intensive way to parent. And a lot of our children actually do really need to be parented this way. Not all of them. And you may have come across good enough parenting, which is the idea that you sort of like do everything you can, you make some mistakes, you try again, and it's probably going to be okay. And for many children, that's true. And it's not true for all children and all families. And so some children really do need more. And some families also decide, like, I actually also want more. I think that our generation of parents is sort of naturally suited to and interested kind of in more gentle positive parenting methods, but sometimes it might feel like this isn't working, like what's going on here, like I'm doing the things, I'm validating the feelings, and my kid isn't listening to me. And in those kinds of situations, it's like, okay, so like, how can we just get a little bit more support? There's this like persistent myth that you're supposed to know how to parent. And it's weird, right? It's a little strange because most of us weren't parented this way. So how would we know how to do it? And I think that support looks different for everybody, but certainly a really big piece of it is making sure that you're taking care of yourself and nurturing your own heart and your own experience so that you can show up. Like it takes some big emotional resiliency to do all weight, right? And to really like be okay without getting like super mad at your child for what's going on, right? Even if it's a really enraging, frustrating conversation. that you're having. So just wanting to encourage you that if you're going to go the route and use these kinds of tools, making sure that you take some time and space for your own self so that you can show up. And that looks different for everybody, but however it looks for you, I encourage you to make sure that you get that. And then, there's been some questions in the chat about, what do I do if I parent this way and my partner doesn't, or my babysitter doesn't, or I can only do it sometimes. And I want to encourage you to really try to make a plan for your family and get on the same page with the other grown-ups who are involved, whether that's grown-ups in a pod or grown-ups in your family, or whatever it looks like. I think key pieces here are like building connection and rapport. And then once those are built, you're gonna use those in order to get your child to cooperate. Now, of course, it's gonna take some work on the end, like on the beginning, in the beginning, right? Because you have to build that up so that that is actually the reason that kids are behaving and participating. I will say that this approach was developed for kids with really major behavioral needs. Um, Kids who have autism, special needs, all kinds of different challenges. And what we've seen over the last 15 years is that all kinds of people come and use this approach. People whose kids have special needs, people whose kids don't have special needs. I actually think the majority now are families with typically developing children, right? Who are just having some stress, especially right now. Like, whoa, it's so stressful for parents trying to manage all of the distance learning stuff. And there's a huge uptick in big feelings. So things to really think about are like really slowing down. Laughter and humor are the way to your child's heart. So keeping it light. Um, if it starts to get really heavy, I would actually just advise you to stop talking. Less words and less language is always going to be make it easier for your child to cooperate. It's going to reduce commotion and enable cooperation. Making sure that they know that you believe that they can do this. They can. Any child can cooperate, and any parent can use this method with their children. And I really believe that you are the very best person to parent your child, right? You might just need or want some support in like how to build the relationship and what kinds of tools to use and when. Making sure there's lots of presence, lots of play, lots of praise, real belief in your child, lots of melodic intonation. And melodic intonation will work for big kids too. Sometimes people will say that won't work for my big kids, but it will. And if when I work with people, we talk about how to make it work for different families, because of course it's different for everyone. So I will close, and I would love to just have some time for question and answer. We've got a little bit of time, but I will say that we've got a couple of courses starting. And so if you are of the mindset that like you're ready to make a shift in your family and you're really ready to help your kids cooperate and build a relationship like this, I'd love to talk to you about our programs. There's a couple of spots. We actually just opened a second cohort because our first one filled of the October courses. So those are options. We also have coaching programs, and there's also a lot of good free stuff that you can get in the Facebook group. Knowing that, it takes a lot to parent this way. And you can totally do it if it's what you want for your child. And if you're ready, to make that kind of investment in your kids and in your family. So I would love to just open it up for people if people have questions, or if you want to talk about a particular, we'll go back to this co-regulation slide, a particular situation or scenario. There is a question in the chat about melodic intonation, so I'll just answer that very briefly. There's actually a lot of resources on melodic intonation in the Facebook group, but what it is using kind of a sing-song voice in order to get your child to cooperate. So you probably all did this with your kids when they were very young. So think about your kids when they were like babies and toddlers. You probably did a lot of singing. And so melodic intonation decreases the burden on the brain, right? It's easier for kids to process and make sense of. So the way to use it is to apply it to the same scenario. So like, say you want your child to get into the car independently and get into their car seat or the booster seat or whatever. Then I would have all caregivers get on the same page and say like, we're gonna go up, 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 and then sit down, down, down. And you're gonna say it that way every single time you do the thing until your child starts to repeat it back and say the thing and it gets easier. Once that part gets easier, I would keep the melodic intonation and I would start using it for a different part of your routine where there are some issues. So it's about using a sing-song voice to decrease the burden of understanding. It's easier to make sense of. Um, if your child's not doing something that you're telling them to do, what they're telling you, they need more support. And so melodic intonation is a support that a lot of kids respond to. I recently had a family, a dad tell me, I'm not melodic, I can't do this. He went home and tried it. His kids would never come to the dinner table. 2 nights. They did it for 2 nights and they solved the problem by just using melodic intonation to bring their kids to the dinner table. Right? He was like, it was like magic. I just called them. I was like, dinner time, dinner time, dinner time. And they started coming. Right? So knowing that kids really get a lot of melodic intonation in a school setting, which I know none of us are at right now. I'm so sorry about that. And it works really well. So I would encourage you to try that. And there's lots more stuff about that in the Facebook group. So what about for other folks? What's coming up for you all? Yeah, what's coming up? What you have questions about? I'm happy to sort of be in conversation about how it's going and what you need, what's coming up with your own kids. So you can unmute yourself and we can talk through any situations that you would like to. No questions? You can also put them in the chat. There's a music teacher in this building. Can you hear him playing the guitar in the background?
I have a question or I have a thing to
Totally.
mention.
Uh-huh.
Like I know you're saying it is hard. Like one of my biggest challenges is being consistent. And so like some days I can do like not your strategies, but I'm able to like slow down and be
Mhm.
more patient, and other days I'm not. And so that I think in itself is hard for my children. And so when you said like, oh, if you're really ready to kind of, this is a hard way of parenting, like, is the inconsistency on my part super detrimental? Or it's kind of like that I know that about myself, that some days I just don't have the energy to be, you know, like,
I think like energetic inconsistencies is part of life.
mm-hmm.
So when I say like, if you're ready, like what I'm speaking to is like, are you ready to try new things, hold on to yourself when it's like, I don't believe this is going to work. I think that, helping your kids to like figure out ways to know, like today mom's kind of tired or today
Yeah.
day. And like I would say, if you're like, I can't do this today, then I'm not going to use all weight. Like in that situation, I would say like, I would want you to probably drop the rope on a lot of things, right? So we're trying to like stay off the battleground, because so often what holds us in the battle with what holds our kids kind of in the battle is the tension from, like, if you think about tug of war, right? It's tension.
Yeah.
And when you don't have, we want to get out of the tension. It's exhausting for us,
Mm-hmm.
I think, too, as parents. And so I think it's also a big piece of this is like reading yourself and saying, like, okay, what are actually the things that matter to me the most? And how am I going to sort of present that and work with my kids on that where I have capacity? Definitely, I think that inconsistency can be hard, really challenging. But when I think of inconsistency, like I'm thinking more about some days I'm willing to, also my kids will do like X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, give a natural logical consequence. And then the next day, or no consequence, I drop the rope. The next day,
Mhm.
I start to maybe make threats, right? Where I say, like, if you don't do this, you're not gonna watch any more TV, or you're gonna start to lose privileges, or you can't go on a play date, or whatever it is. It's like those kinds of inconsistencies, which I think are less energetic and more about like getting more tools into your pocket so that you have more ways to help them cooperate, even when you're exhausted. And of course, like, I think that we want our kids to be able to navigate a range of emotions with us too.
Right. Yeah.
Getting some, especially right now, I think it's also, you have to kind of be gentle with yourself,
Mhm.
because right now it's just so much. It's really more than is really humanly possible, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think, I find for myself and for most of the families that I work with that it takes definitely some intentionality. And
Mhm.
as parenting this way becomes sort of like the way you live and breathe and be in the world,
Like becomes more like habitual and natural. Like
easier. It's actually, you're not in the fights. So it's like easier to be consistent because,
Mhm.
you have enough tools to like know what to do. Um, or to know, like today we're having this whatever version of the frog issue, right? And
Yeah.
today I like feel like I totally got it. So today I'm gonna do this with him. And like tomorrow I don't have it. I just had a hard day at work. And so like I'm gonna go this other route, which I think is okay and good.
Yeah, you're right. Because I'm like, oh, I can't be consistent, but then it is. I mean, like humans aren't always exactly the same ever. We're not robots. So
And you can be consistent about like always saying like about the lights, like light on, you always
right.
light on, and then that's your consistency,
Yeah. Okay.
you know?
And I had a question. Like, also, I don't want to bombard if someone else has a question, but my son,
And then we'll go to Christine after this question.
okay, he what he does when he's upset is he says really mean things to people, to us, like I hate you, this is the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
um, like that's been his thing since he was like 2. And you said, like, when you said the whole I'll wait thing, like, and then you don't address it maybe till bedtime, like how would you word it, like, because I always say to him, like, your reaction to this is huge compared to, I think, I see the problem as like moderate versus your reaction. He goes to like the extremes.
Yeah.
I don't know how to like I'm like, I don't know how to word it when we're in a calm state to like
Yeah.
talk him through like that. He
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I think many of us have children who say these kinds of provocative things. Um, the first thing I want to say is mostly I hear and see people say like, don't say that, or we don't say hate in our family, or like those kinds of things, or you really do love your sister, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I think what happens then is our kids tend to really dig into it. Like, no, I do hate her. I do hate the Zoom school. And so I would go the route of just saying you feel like you hate school, or you feel like you hate your sister. Um, because then what you're doing is turning into a feeling. So then it's like, okay, this is a feeling, it's going to pass. And he also, or she also, I don't know if it's a son or a daughter, feels met, right? And gets that feeling of being felt. And when they have that feeling of being felt, it's
Okay.
going to be a lot easier. And I would probably say that one time, yeah, you feel like you hate your sister. And then after that, I would just like oil and water, let it, like I didn't hear it. So like
Okay.
one time I would, give him the feeling, maybe even 2 times. But after that, I would really want to praise him for other things that he's doing that are the right thing. And oftentimes, like, our kids get really concentrated reactions from us when they say stuff like that, which is normal. I mean, it's hard when one kid says like they hate their sibling, or they wish they were dead, or like they never want to go to school, or whatever it is. It's hard to hear that as a parent. But they're getting concentrated attention. And so for it, probably.
Right.
And so I would just turn into a feeling, and then I would not give a lot of response to it. The flip side of that is, for that to work, you have to give a lot of concentrated attention to the positive things.
So when you say you feel like you hate your sister, say it right when he says it or later at
Right when
bedtime?
he says it, I like you hate.
Okay.
And then maybe at bedtime, you can say like, "Oh, that was kind of tricky with your sister.
Okay.
Tomorrow gonna be a whole day older. I bet it's
Okay.
gonna be easier." So it's like,
Okay.
you've got this. I know you're gonna get it. Um, what about Christine? And then we'll go to Claire.
Hi.
Hi.
He, yeah, so my son's 7 and he's always disliked school. Part of it is he wants to be home. I mean, this was kindergarten first. He wanted, doesn't want to leave us. And now we're doing school virtually. And so he's not leaving us, but he's crying. It's
Yeah.
hard running away from the computer, saying, I hate school. And so I think 3 yeses are great. And we're definitely going to try that tomorrow. And what do you say after the 3 yeses? Like, do you just wait and hope that he resumes in going back to school? Or I guess, yeah.
So hard. I feel you so much on this. I have a child who's very similar to this. So I just feel you. So it's very impractical, especially if you're working, because it may be that what he actually needs is for you to sit with him,
Mm.
which is, I know if like, I know it's just impossible thing to ask, right? But like, he may actually need that, even though it's impossible.
Mhm.
And I would also say I want to give him some tools so that he sort of has a way to measure what he needs to do and what is happening. And one that I would suggest is a time timer. So there's a free time timer app. And I don't know if folks know what that is, but it's a timer that you can set up for whatever amount of time you want, and it has a red wedge, and the wedge gets smaller. So for kids who are like, either don't know how to read a clock that is like, or just a lot of kids like do better with that visual, even if they do know how to read a clock. Then they can watch the clock go by. So that works really well for a lot of kids, where you say like, look, here's our clock. We got 30 minutes with this teacher, and then we're going to do something delightful. And I would give him so much praise. Like, I know you can do this. I might look at flexible seating if there's like a way that you can get him a bouncy chair or a wobbly stool. And I also, I think you have to really think about, for your child, what is the amount that he can participate positively. And I would then say to the teacher, this is the amount my child can do this for. And should we, if it's a 30-minute session and you say he can only do 20 minutes, then like, should we come for the first 20 minutes or the last 20 minutes or the middle? And then
Yeah, his teacher. Sorry.
I would hold that, like that's the agreement that I've made with my children. In fact, well, we're gonna do this for 30 minutes. And when the timer goes off, she goes over all the time. My kids are like, timer's off. I'm like, okay, we're done.
Yeah, I actually feel like his teacher does a very good job. He's in 2nd grade, and my kindergartner's teacher actually goes way longer. And his is like 20-minute sessions, and then he has a good amount of break. It's just he has a lot of anxiety around school. So it's just, that's the tough part.
Definitely 3 yeses. I would do as much melodic intonation as possible. So like, time for Zoom. Now we're done. If you have to sit with him, I think that's okay. And so much praise. I just would praise him for like even a shard of like, I see you're walking towards the computer. That's rad. Like, even just the littlest piece. And it doesn't have to be good job focused. It can just be like, I see you walking towards the computer. Oh, look at you opening it up, getting on that Zoom, right? So there's like a lot of positive stuff. And, some people will say, like, don't use extrinsic rewards. But I actually think extrinsic rewards are fine if they're not like all the time. It's like salt, right? So that's like a reward for doing something. So you might say, like, I know you can do this. And when you finish your Zooms for today, then we're going to do whatever, something he loves, like go swimming with mom, or like make cookies, or like something that's you're going to do together to really be like, this is so awesome. You did awesome today.
Yeah.
This is such an impossible situation. I mean, it's really developmentally inappropriate, like to have a Zoom like this. So
Yeah.
we feel for all of our kids who are just really struggling.
Thank you.
Definitely a timer. I would really, really encourage you to look at a timer. Claire, did you have a question?
Hi, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question, but I feel like you addressed it in the last few questions. So my question was mostly, which strategies work best if you have one child who needs a lot of attention in that moment and you have two children? And, so I think the 3 yeses and the melodic intonation I'm hearing, but which other strategies will work best when, you're parenting 2 children at the same time, when your spouse is working or away or
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there was another question about this in the chat where it's just like, many of us, I think it's like 1 on 2 or 3 or 4 or even more. And I think that definitely you can use all of these strategies for both kids. If it's not working, probably what they're telling you is that they need more. I know that's like another impossible ask at the moment, but it is what they're telling you, that they need more time. I think a lot of families struggle with this like dynamic that often will happen where you praise one child and then the other child is like feeling a little jealous that they're not also getting praise, and so starts to act out in order to sort of get praise. And in those kinds of moments, I want people to kind of praise the sibling group, like you want to reinforce the unit of children. And so I would steer clear of things like, oh, X child made it to the dinner table. Where it's like you're saying that because the other child isn't there yet. I would steer clear of like, who can finish getting their pajamas on first and those kinds of things. And like rather build in things like, we all get our pajamas on together, or we all get ice cream as soon as our pajamas are on. Let's see if we can do it all as a sibling unit in 3 minutes or in 2 minutes. So it's a little bit fun. Definitely if you have kids who are sort of, getting into it or fighting with each other, you want to address the child. If there's a child who's hurt, of course, you're going to deal with that child first. But I want to then bring them back together, right? And I might practice. I think practicing getting along for kids is really good, where you say, like, I think we're going to play together for, I don't know, 7 minutes, and we're going to put a timer on, and we're going to practice playing together. And when we can play together, and then I would give a single rule, which, maybe something like if it's a physical issue, when we play together, we keep our hands on our own body. And you think we can do it for 7 minutes? And then we let them play for 7 minutes. And then when the timer goes off, so much praise. So now we've just practiced. And then I'm going to we've practiced how we want them to be. You're going to have to be in the mix, especially in the beginning. And then you want to start to stretch it so that, especially when you're on your own, right? Your kids get longer and longer periods of time where they are sort of on their, able to go on their own. I also, something that I also will have people do a lot when you have siblings who are all kind of needing a lot of attention, is you can do a special 5 for each child. So typically what that would look like is every hour or every 2 hours, depending on the age of your children, You're going to give each child like very concentrated, high quality presence for 5 minutes. And I would, in case you haven't noticed, I really like timers. So put a timer on. You only have to do the make-believe play or the game or whatever it is for 5 minutes, and make it super delightful. And then when this child's special 5 is over, then we're going to do this child's special 5, right? You could also, I mean, you could do it one-on-one with the children, or you could do it for the sibling unit where this special 5, child A picks, the next special 5, child B picks what we're going to do. So they start to learn how to kind of share time and space. But yeah, it's definitely, it's tricky when there's multiple kids in the mix for sure. And you can definitely, I mean, I do this approach with 3 kids who are within 17 months of each other. And we've had families with, I just had a family come through that had 7 kids, 5 kids, and then 2 stepkids who are a little bit older, but still 7 kids. So, I think you can do it. It just takes some intentionality, and it takes really slowing down and building in some practice time for the kids to practice what you do want them to do in the places where it's tricky.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We have time maybe for one more question if there's another question.
This is Shannon.
Yeah, Shannon.
Hi, I have a 5-year-old and a just turned 2-year-old. Both boys. My 5-year-old requires so much more attention and energy than the babies. Just kind of chill, go with the flow. And a lot of what you said about the e-learning has resonated with us. He's been hating it. But I think the thing I'm most concerned with is we have a lot of impulse control issues where he gets really aggressive, and he's kind of been this way since his brother was born, where he's just a real high energy kid. So he'll knock him over, he'll, and he starts to kind of take on the bad boy, all that kind of persona, especially if he's, he'll lose his temper. And I've tried so many of these tools, and I feel like some days I have the patience of the saint. Some days I feel like I just gotta we have to take care of this problem. And then, like you said, we get in a negative cycle of co-regulation. I'd really he even got in trouble a couple times at school for throwing something, but he's a really good shot. So he'll hit the person that he throws. So aggression and impulse control, where you have a kid with a temper, and he's a lot of the things that we've tried, he doesn't like things unless they're his idea. So a lot of the suggestions kind of fall flat. Things need to be his idea to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? We have these, you've got 2 kids with such different profiles, right? And some of them just come out that way, right? And he does need more, right? He just has higher needs.
But the poor little one's got stitches. He's been knocked over, and so many things have happened.
Yeah,
in the
meantime. So, I think there's a couple of things. I think that for a kid with this kind of profile, and certainly I would say many of the families that we work with have kids with this kind of profile, he probably needs really clear boundaries, and probably a lot of praise. And I want to stretch him, right? So that he sometimes, I use sometimes language a lot, right? So it's sometimes you get to decide, sometimes mama decides. I don't know. Is it going to be your turn today or my turn? So that he starts to sort of stretch, right? And you can go slowly, you stretch this much and then you stretch this much. And I would use a lot of gestures and a lot of melodic intonation when he does the stuff like throwing or hitting. That's kind of, that's the stuff that you don't want him to be doing. And that starts to get physical. I want to try get in there as soon as possible and just give him the positive opposite. So say he's hitting his brother, and they're and you see it start to happen, then I want you to go in there, get your body in there between the two of them. And I
Okay.
would say to him, oh, I would grasp his hands in my hands and say to him, oh, hands on our own body. And then usually one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to like look kind of sheepish and back down and like resume playing. And then I would just, if he goes that way, I would just repeat, okay, so it looks like you're ready to play again. That means hands on body. And if so, they don't always like go that sheepish, okay, route, right? Sometimes that might make him more mad if you're like hands on your own body. And if that's the case, then I would stop the activity. So I'd say, oh, it looks like it's too tricky, with no kind of like trying really hard to keep all the tone out of your voice. Looks like it's too tricky. You can try again tomorrow. And then I would put the object away or move into a different room. So that he had with a positive direction. Okay, so it looks like it's too tricky. Now it's time for lunch, Legos, whatever, playing outside. But oftentimes, like we'll say, like don't hit or don't throw, those kinds of things. And what happens is that the last thing that the kid hears is throw or don't hit your sister. Then they hear hit your sister, and so then they keep doing it, right? So I want to shift the language, which is, it's like one of those things, it's a small shift where it's like, instead I just want to say, oh, hands on own body or feet on floor, or trains going, whatever, on the train track, so that they know what to do. So I'm giving them a little space to say like, I don't know, maybe you really don't know what to do. But yeah, I feel you. I think these kinds of kids who have higher needs and often, like do really well with these kinds of tools because they're relationship based. And it takes a lot to parent a kid like that. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel like it's my lack of consistency because he stretches it so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what it is. Sometimes there's a series of small changes we can make that can help our kids cooperate. Oftentimes, like you wouldn't have to make those series of changes in your own self if you had a different kid. So like, it sounds to me like if you were only parenting your younger child, we wouldn't be having this conversation because you would never know that you had to be so like do all these specific things so that he could cooperate. Our kids just have such different profiles that some kids really do need more, and most kids at some point in their life are going to need more, right? Just, it's kind of up and down.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, my dears, I think we should probably wrap up unless there's anything burning that anybody would like to share before we go. It's been great to be together. It's been really wonderful to spend a little bit of time with you all. I would love to, just hear about how you guys are doing. If you're not in the Facebook group, definitely hop in there. If you are, looking to really make a shift in your parenting, we should definitely talk about the course. It's 12 weeks. We just opened a second cohort. It starts in October. Happy to chat with any of you about that. Otherwise, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. And just sending all the love and patience and kindness and support during this really extraordinary time that we're living through. Take good care.